Welcome, Gerrit Imsieke. He will talk about CSS, but some special flavor of CSS, which is, I think, cool because from the morning we have several times heard about XSLT, so it's nice to have something about similar, but in some aspects competing technology.
Yeah. So this talk is entitled Conveying Layout Information with CSSa, CSS as Attributes. In a nutshell, it's the CSS3 vocabulary for properties expressed as XML attributes. It's a neutral, a standardized vocabulary, of course, as per the CSS source, the standard, for conveying layout information in XML document conversions, for example, from Word to DocBook or from InDesign to EPUB. It's intended as an orthogonal layer, just like RDFa on top of other XML vocabularies. So you can just edit and keep your structure otherwise as it is. We have developed a relaxing schema for CSSa, where we took many of the CSS3 properties and created the regexes, etc., for checking not only the property names as is available in the W3C CSS validator, but also the permitted values for layout properties. And of course, CSSa is XML friendly. It's not a plain text format anymore because all the layout properties go into XML attributes, which makes them very palatable to schematron checks or XSLT grouping of similarly styled content. So this is the main purpose, because we use XML, the XML toolchain heavily to also be able to do our, for example, checks there in that pipeline and not in the browser and not visually, so by Schematron. Yeah, I couldn't resist including this epic tweet from last year's conference from an outsider. And yeah, we will try to add another simple concept to the beautiful and also simple XML stack that we already have. Yeah. So our situation is like that. We have, should be familiar to some of you, we have n input formats and m output formats, and we don't want to develop and maintain n times m converters, but have a kind of centralized, neutral, intermediate format so that we only have to develop n plus m converters. And we found out that when we designed that central format, it's important to also capture the rendering information with that. So then we are able to do something with that rendering information. For example, if you have a Word manuscript, for example, from our lawyer, the lawyers don't use paragraph styles, etc. So you can check for all boldface paragraphs with some vertical space afterwards, and then heuristically detect that this should be a heading, and then warn the author that this pseudo-heading won't be converted to a proper heading in EPUB. So we can do that with XML-friendly information and with schematron checks, or we can heuristically upconvert this pseudo-heading to a proper heading by using that layout information. And of course, we can selectively filter away some of that information. For example, if we have an HTML file with CSS and we have some position fixed or position absolute that is not permitted in EPUB, we can just throw it away and see how that renders. And the good thing is it will pass epubcheck, and that's most important for most publishers that we work with. So yeah, and centrally, the central requirement was that it should be compatible with our XML toolchain. And this is approximately how, what kind of input we are dealing with and what we do with it. So we have essentially a flat input. IDML is the InDesign equivalent of DocX, and these are essentially flat formats. And the task, if we want to have any interesting format such as DocBook or JATS, we have to somehow upconvert it. And we are using a central format for that. That is essentially a flattened DocBook, DocBook 5, with the addition of CSSa and with the addition of publishing concepts such as tabs and line breaks. And we are using this in XProc pipelines or in XSLT micropipelines, and it's a good thing in the XProc scenario that we are able to insert certain schematron checks or relaxing validations after every step. So, this is where we can check for CSSa attributes, for example. Yeah. Layout information, and this is a CSS example. It's the same in Word or in InDesign. Comes in two flavors. One is centralized styles, or the classes in HTML, and the other is local overrides. And what we do with CSSa is to map, here in this example, an HTML class with its CSS rule with its properties to a CSS rule element, where we just have these individual properties translated to attributes. And the same for explicit styling or local overrides. We just transform it to CSS namespace prefixed attributes. And this is an example of an IDML file, InDesign's format. This is also what in HTML was the class definition for some CSS class. It's the same here. We have some styled paragraph of text. It has 14 points, Minion Pro, and 2 millimeters, and this is InDesign's unit is point, space before and after, and the green color is a CMYK color in InDesign. So this is what we see in the IDML file, and a similar text as we see it in DocX. They have a completely different vocabulary, and they have very strange units of measurements. You have these trips, 20th of a point for the spacing before and after, and you have the double of the font point size as the size. So it's 14 point, as we can see here. Yeah, and what we do, and we developed property maps in our IDML and DocX to flattened DocBook conversion. There are property maps that normalize these properties to CSSa, and as Michael K. announced that Saxon CE would be open source, we are open sourcing these conversion pipelines and these property maps too, so everybody can normalize their IDML to CSSa. And we see that it has become quite similar, the only difference being that Word uses RGB colors and IDML uses CMYK colors. And this device CMYK is a new property newly introduced to CSS3, and we are using it here. And it's really a good thing that many of the interesting properties are now, also for list markers, are now quite usable in CSS3. Therefore, our decision to use CSS3. Yeah, so we saw that we map CSS properties to CSSa attributes. What about CSS selectors and the cascade, the precedence information? So CSS has three major components, selectors. We saw that last year when Robin Bergeon presented a similar thing, or the opposite direction, where he mapped Schematron rules to JavaScript with CSS selectors, and we also see CSS selectors in jQuery, and everywhere, everybody on the web is using CSS selectors. We don't, because XPath is, of course, more powerful. And but what we did is develop a CSS expander for HTML. So creating an XSLT from the styling information that is being gathered from centralized linked styles or explicit local override formatting, applying all these or translating all these priorities of CSS to XSLT template, matching template priorities, and applying that to the HTML input in order to make every formatting explicit at every element, so that you can check, for example, a resulting EPUB that is intended for mobipocket publication for some attributes that aren't supported in mobipocket. We will see an example later. And it works like that. This is a sample input. We have two paragraphs here, one in a div, class foo, one plain, and we have three CSS rules here, and I'm asking the audience which color these two paragraphs will have according to the CSS priority rules. I will tell you. So this is has precedence because it's more specific, that rule. And between these two with the same selector, the last one wins. And these are essentially, so rendered, it looks like that. And this is essentially what we did with that expander. So this is the expanded version of that. And it has the corresponding CSSa attributes attached to it. This is what I said about the mobipocket checks. We have created a demo, an experimental epubcheck extension where you can put in customer-specific checking rules or device-specific checking rules. If you want to apply a certain publisher style, then you can just plug in your own schematrons, or you can, as we did here, check for mobipocket compatibility. So this is a rule that applies in the context of an element that has a CSS text transform property attribute. And you could, of course, you couldn't do these Schematron thing with plain text style attributes or go up the whole cascade and look up what is defined in some CSS text document. So this is the purpose of that expander, make that explicit on every element, and then issue a message that this text transform is not supported in mobipocket. And this is how the report looks. It's quite small here. You see that same message, text transform uppercase not supported here. This is, I think, Internet Explorer component running in a Java desktop application, and Internet Explorer surprisingly is able to apply text transform uppercase. So we see it uppercase here, but the warning is, and you can check it then in that report, that the Kindle, the old Kindle, the mobipocket format can't display that properly. And it's not so, it's not that bad that you wouldn't publish it, but you get a warning that you can act upon. Okay, that's one application. The other application of this is a quirk in InDesign. You can style everything centrally except for table widths. So we are applying a selective CSS expansion in the context of an, or first we create from a Word file, we see an example now, a Word file, we transform it to TEI, which is the publisher's central format, create an HTML preview from that, and style that with CSS so that the table cells get their proper width. And then we expand it selectively so that we can just map the CSS width attributes to IDML's corresponding properties. And let's see, I'll try to demo the whole workflow, which I think in all modesty is quite impressive, creating InDesign from Word without having to use the applications. So I'm inserting here something, saving the docx file, and then running a XProc pipeline that will emit several warnings. And in the end, we'll see the HTML preview. We could inspect it and see the centralized CSS. And afterwards, it translates into proper InDesign tables where we otherwise would have the problem how to apply the width information to the cells. So while this is still running, here's an old version of the resulting file. And so this is the IDML synthesis is really a beast of a pipeline, and I won't submit it to the XProcathon, I think. And now we have it in the HTML preview, but I could also open the IDML, and you will see that text there too. Yeah, even in times of SSDs, InDesign takes some time. I once said the number after the CS is the number of minutes that it takes to start up on my machine. Luckily, I have a new machine now, but still. So how can I have a nicer preview? So, yeah, this is just a bit of bragging so that we can make IDML from docx. I don't know whether you are very impressed with that, but we are quite proud of that. Okay, you see the result, then I will continue. Yeah, as I said, we developed a relaxing schema for that. You see here a regex that will check for length, and then the padding pattern for the padding property is defined as either a length or a percentage, which is defined on some other place, and then we define the proper attributes, padding left. We don't do these compound attributes, so there is no CSS padding. You only have padding left, padding right, etc. In order to facilitate these schematron checks so that you don't have to parse compound properties such as border, where you have border width and border color and border style. So these all. So if you have a border 1px black solid or what's it, you will end up with 12 distinct CSSa properties. But so be it. You can check it. Your machine will check it. You don't have to look at that. Yeah, and this is a thing. The schema. I think it's now at about 1,200 lines of schema, and we have mapped approximately 50 properties so far. The most commonly used, of course, in our workflows, and plus XML lang for the language. We saw that in the HTML preview. No, I don't. No, it's not so clearly visible. You see that yellow line? This is because Word doesn't visualize very well the language that is selected for a certain text run. And we can do this highlighting by just styling text with some attributes. So this is also an example of this concept. And we are proposing a namespace for that CSS prefix that we are using. And since CSS, I think, is a bit older than XML in 1996, we are proposing this one. And the schema, as I said, contains that concept of named rules that correspond to HTML or CSS classes. And a binding mechanism. So if you have DocBook with roles, then you can declare that what is a role attribute's value should select a certain CSS rule, a certain styling or type in TEI lingo. In Word and InDesign, you often have inheritance of styles, so that a style is derived on something else. We flatten this because otherwise it would be too difficult, again, to check styling, so everything gets flattened. That is part of the concept. Yeah, what is still to be done? Minor things such as unit conversion libraries, or if you have relative dimensions, trace them back to their absolute values if they are available. What will be a bit more difficult is if you have lots of explicit formatting on elements, generate styles from that so that you have a minimal set of styles and with minimal remaining local overrides. This is essentially a data compression problem, and I tried to implement that because I wanted to show you that in XSLT, but for a not so complex problem, it had calculated several hours, and then I stopped that. You have to have efficient data compression algorithms for that. Another thing on the agenda would be to modularize the schema so that you have different checking profiles like the W3C checker has for CSS 2.1 or EPUB 2 or EPUB 3. And of course, a thing on the agenda is to collect your feedback and act upon it and develop the spec or the tools around that collaboratively. So to sum up, CSSa provides a standardized vocabulary for adding layout information as an orthogonal layer on your existing XML, just like RDFa for semantics. And it makes this layout information usable in your XML toolchain. And these are the things that I demonstrated, the schema that we developed, this expander, the mapping of Word and InDesign properties to CSSa, converters from InDesign and so to to flattened DocBook and plus CSSa. The other way around, the opposite direction, IDML synthesis from XHTML or other XML dialects. You can already access these tools on our Subversion repository. We are just thinking about whether to move them to GitHub. And we released 1.5 years ago this epubcheck demo with device-specific checking rules. So this is what we are having, and I say thanks for your attention.
Thank you, and we have time for questions.
You are hungry.
There is a question from Mohammed.
Yeah, just, okay. Do you hear me? Yes. Just because everybody is hungry, so I will speak slowly. So I will take my time to ask the question. Okay, so, no, just, it's very impressive. I think it's like everybody tweets the same thing, saying that, oh my God, it's very impressive. And so are you going to contribute it somewhere so we can just jump on the code, and the best would be to do that in the next minutes or so, because it seems like everybody is eager to start. So just a note. So just a note about that. But very, very impressive, just to say that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as I said, we already are releasing this. You can already access it. I'll tweet some links later on, I think. Yeah, okay.
And we can add links to the website, so it's easy to find it and follow from presentation.
Yeah.
So we have still time for one additional question.
Have you, I mean, first off, very impressive. It looks to me like a publication workflow, publication street, so going from the source towards renditions. Yeah. Have you done any effort of getting the improvements out of that workflow, out of that street, back into the source?
Pardon, I didn't quite...
Well, from a well-structured document, it's easy to get a well-rendered document.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've done some effort on deducing from the layout properties what kind of structure element it should have been in the first place.
Yeah.
Is there any effort ongoing to improve the structure via this process?
Well, yes, if you see these formats as manuscript formats, then of course your effort will be to have a properly structured document in first place. But often the requirements are that the author needs to get a Word file back, and then he will mess up the whole structuring again. But publishers dream of, I don't know whether you are hinting at this, of these round trip workflows, and of course it's feasible, but in some respects it's just not applicable to here, because if you compare that InDesign rendering, its layout was completely different from the Word rendering, and of course an approach is to carry along your XML data, your TEI in that example of that publisher, along with the IDML or with InDesign, and then re-export it. But InDesign and XML, I blogged about it from time to time. I will link to it later. InDesign doesn't lend itself very well to XML piggybacking, so it's not really usable, so that we end up frequently with, again and again, heuristically deriving semantics from layout. I don't know whether this answered your question, but I don't care because I'm also hungry.